The Marvel Cinematic Universe has been going strong since 2008, but its story at this point covers thousands of years. Need to catch up on the latest developments? Let's just go through the whole thing.
Where to start?
If you really want to know where things started in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you have to go all the way back to before the Big Bang. No, really. Before the beginning of the universe, before even the creation of the 6 singularities that caused the universe to explode into existence, there were the Celestials. Beings of infinite cosmic power, the Celestials, led by Arishem the Judge, created the original planets, stars, and life forms of the infant universe following the Big Bang. Realizing they need help to expand the universe and create more life, the first Celestials seed planets with embryonic Celestials. These new gods would be born once sentient life on each planet rose to a critical juncture, allowing for the emergence of a new Celestial and resulting in the destruction of that world. To assist in this process, the Celestials genetically engineered deviant monsters to wipe out the apex predators of each world, encouraging sentient life to develop and multiply. Unfortunately, the Celestials miscalculated. The deviants did their job so well, they started hunting down and killing all life forms, preventing emergences. To keep them in check, the Celestials created the Eternals, synthetic life forms sent to different worlds across the cosmos to kill the deviants and protect the planet's life forms. Regarded as gods and superheroes by the populace, the Eternals are unknowingly preparing the planets for their destruction. Following each emergence, the Eternals' memories are wiped so they could be reused on different worlds. Meanwhile, other interesting things are happening throughout the universe. The 6 singularities that created the cosmos became the Infinity Stones, objects that controlled fundamental forces like time, space, and reality itself. They were then scattered across the universe, popping up here and there and awaiting the eventual arrival of a giant golden oven mitt that would be used by a purple sociopath to kill off half the universe. That, of course, was billions of years ago, but it's not the only thing to happen in those long eons. Millions of years before we get to the present-day MCU, Ego the Living Planet comes into existence, gains cosmic awareness, and seeds thousands of worlds with his essence in an attempt to create another celestial being like himself. But though he may in fact be a godlike figure, in the end he's still essentially just a selfish, deadbeat dad. No wonder Peter has issues.
Well, of course I have issues! That's my freaking father!
As far as heroes and villains of Earth are concerned, the MCU doesn't start with Tony Stark getting kidnapped in 2008, Carol Danvers being taken to Hala in the 90s, or even with Steve Rogers volunteering for the Super Soldier program in the 40s. The actual beginning happened in 5000 BC, when 10 immortal Eternals, Circe, Icarus, Ajax, Kingo, Sprite, Phastos, Makari, Thena, Druig, and Gilgamesh arrived on Earth to take out the deviants on our planet. For thousands of years, the Eternals protected emerging humankind, largely through epic super battles with giant monsters. By 1521, the Eternals finally managed to defeat all the deviants on Earth, or so they think. Lacking any real direction now that their main reason for coming to the planet is gone, they scatter and get jobs as teachers, Bollywood film stars, and South American cult leaders. Since the Celestials have instructed the Eternals not to interfere in humanity unless deviants were involved, other godlike beings get the chance to descend onto Earth and have their time to shine. These include the Asgardians, vastly powerful alien beings who visit our planet many times and give rise to Norse mythology. Still, the most exciting stuff those guys were up to happens off-world in the realm of Asgard. This mythological timescale begins millennia ago, as we find out in Thor: The Dark World, when Malekith the Accursed lays siege to Asgard and is fought off by Bor, the father of Odin. Bor vanquishes Malekith, which turns out to be a temporary solution. While we don't know exactly when it happens, the next chronological event that we see from our characters is Odin's conquest of the 9 realms alongside his first child, Hela, goddess of death. During this era, the magic warhammer Mjolnir is forged in the heart of a dying star and used by Hela. Thanks to her bloodthirsty ruthlessness and ambition, Odin turns against her, and in the battle that follows, Hela slaughters the Valkyrior. The sole surviving Valkyrie flees from Asgard, spending the next few thousand years drunk and depressed. Eventually, she winds up on Sakaar, a cosmic garbage dump that an immortal being called the Grand Master builds into an interstellar gladiatorial arena. Hela is then imprisoned in another dimension by Odin, who covers up all traces of her existence. Sometime after that, but still far enough back that people were writing about it in the 13th century, Odin and Frigga have a son, Thor. Shortly thereafter, Odin slays the frost giant Laufey and adopts his son Loki as his own. Not too long after this, during their youth, Loki turns into a snake because he knows Thor loves snakes and then tries to stab him. In one universe, he manages to succeed.
What was your Nexus event, Your Majesty?
I killed Thor.
Also, millions of years before the present day, a meteorite made of the super metal vibranium strikes Earth in Africa, drastically affecting the surrounding area. Much later, this area becomes the country of Wakanda, when a warrior shaman receives a vision from the goddess Bast and founds a dynasty of kings known as the Black Panthers. The Wakandans become secretive and isolationist, remaining unconquered throughout history and using the vibranium to create fantastic technology, away from the eyes of the outside world. Moving to just about 1,000 years before the present day, the warlord Shu Wenwu makes a fantastic discovery of his own, when he comes across 10 otherworldly rings that grant him immortality and the strength of a god. Using the rings to establish his 10 Rings criminal organization, Wenwu conquers kingdoms and topples governments, amassing an incredible power structure that influences the direction of the world. Believe it or not, there's not a whole lot that happens between the unification of Wakanda, the rise of Wenwu, and the 20th century. In 1693, the witch Agatha Harkness escapes being burned at the stake by her mother, and a bunch of other witches who aren't happy with her practice of dark magic. She drains their life energies and gets her hands on the Darkhold before disappearing to get into all sorts of trouble before she pops up again in the present day. Jumping ahead to 1942, a Nazi officer known as Johann Schmidt experiments on himself with an early version of Dr. Abraham Erskine's super soldier serum, gaining both a physically perfect body and a decidedly redder complexion. Now calling himself the Red Skull, he takes charge of a splinter group called a Hydra. With the discovery of one of the Infinity Stones in the form of the Tesseract, he creates a technologically advanced army of his own. That same year, Steve Rogers volunteers for the Strategic Scientific Reserves attempt at creating a super soldier using a technique created by Dr. Abraham Erskine. The project works, giving Steve the body of a hunky Chris Evans. After the experiment, Erskine is assassinated, and his research is lost. Rather than risking their only super soldier by sending him to fight in the war, the SSR gives Steve the codename Captain America, and uses him primarily as a spokesman to sell war bonds and USO shows set to an extremely catchy song. Eventually, Steve goes AWOL to rescue his best friend Bucky Barnes and becomes an active soldier in the war, leading a strike team called the Howling Commandos, including Bucky. On one of their missions, Bucky falls from a train into a ravine, seemingly to his death. However, Bucky is actually taken into custody by the Soviet army, given cybernetic enhancements, and brainwashed into becoming a super assassin, codenamed Winter Soldier. After attempting to use the Tesseract, the Red Skull is sucked into a wormhole, becoming the second person in Captain America the First Avenger to survive an apparent death. In reality, he winds up on the distant planet Vormir, serving as a sort of spectral guardian for the Soul Stone. As for Steve, he crashes a bomber jet into the Arctic to keep Hydra from destroying New York. He is also presumed dead, but he survives, frozen in suspended animation for the next 66 years. Jeez, doesn't anyone who dies in this movie actually die? While things are pretty quiet for the MCU between 1945 and 1995, there are a few notable exceptions. Peggy Carter continues to work for the SSR, first in New York in 1946, and then in Los Angeles alongside Howard Stark in 1947. Around this time, the Soviet Union produces the first graduates of its brutal Red Room facility, where orphaned girls are trained as spies and assassins, codenamed Black Widows. Sometime after this, presumably around 1948 or 49, Steve Rogers travels back in time from 2023 to reunite with Peggy. She continues to work in military intelligence for the next few decades with Stark, whose defense contracts turned Stark Industries into the world's leading arms manufacturer. By 1970, both of them are working out of SSR headquarters at Camp Lehigh, along with a few other notable figures. Arnhem Zola, who worked with the Red Skull back in the 40s, is stationed here, and although his body dies in the 70s, his brain is transferred into a computer databank that continues Hydra's infiltration of the government. Also, Hank Pym is working here, assisted by Bill Foster in his experiments with the size-changing Pym particles that will allow him and his wife Janet Van Dyne to become the original Ant-Man and Wasp. Between the 70s and the 90s, several small but key events happened